The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets across the Montana wilderness, blanketing everything in a suffocating white silence. Jacob Morrison had been riding for 3 days straight, his newborn daughter wrapped tightly against his chest, her tiny whimpers growing weaker with each passing hour. The baby's cries had become the only sound that mattered in his world, a desperate plea he was powerless to answer. His wife Sarah had died bringing their daughter into the world. The midwife had done everything she could, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. In her final moments, Sarah had pressed the baby into Jacob's arms, her eyes pleading with him to protect their child, to keep her alive no matter what. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with a newborn who needed milk he couldn't provide. The ranch was isolated, a full day's ride from the nearest town, and Jacob knew the baby wouldn't survive the journey. He'd tried everything: sugar water, thin gruel, even milk from the goats they kept, but nothing worked. The baby would take a few drops, then turn her head away, crying with a hunger he couldn't satisfy. Her lips were turning pale, her skin taking on a translucent quality that terrified him. In desperation, Jacob had mounted his horse and begun searching every homestead, every cabin, every settlement within riding distance. But winter had driven most folks to town, and those who remained either had no children or their children were long grown. Door after door closed with sympathetic shakes of heads and helpless expressions. His daughter was dying, and he was running out of time. On the third day, as the sun began its early winter descent, Jacob spotted smoke rising from a small cabin nestled in a grove of pine trees. He'd never known anyone lived this far out, in this remote corner between his land and the mountains. The cabin was modest but well-maintained, with neat stacks of firewood and a small vegetable garden now buried under snow. He dismounted with difficulty, his legs stiff from days in the saddle, and carefully adjusted the bundle of blankets protecting his daughter. Her cries had stopped hours ago, and the silence was far more terrifying than any sound. With his heart pounding, he approached the door and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, revealing a young Chinese woman wrapped in a vibrant orange robe. Her long black hair was pinned back, and her eyes widened in surprise at the sight of the snow-covered cowboy standing at her threshold. They widened further when she saw the bundle in his arms. Jacob's throat tightened as he tried to find words. "Please," he managed, his voice cracking. "My baby. She needs milk. My wife died, and I can't. I don't know what to do." The woman's expression shifted from surprise to immediate understanding. Without a word, she stepped back and gestured for him to enter. Jacob stumbled inside, grateful for the warmth that enveloped him. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the smell of herbs hanging in the air. She quickly cleared a space near the fire and indicated for him to sit. Then she reached for the baby, her movements gentle but urgent. Jacob hesitated only a moment before placing his daughter in her arms. The woman pulled back the blankets, examining the infant with knowing eyes. She said something in Chinese, shaking her head with concern. Jacob watched helplessly as she moved efficiently around the cabin, gathering things he couldn't identify. She heated water, mixed something in a bowl, and then, to his amazement, she opened her robe and brought the baby to her breast. His daughter latched on immediately, and the sound of her feeding filled the cabin like a prayer answered. Tears streamed down Jacob's face as he watched his child drink. The woman looked up at him, and despite the language barrier, he saw understanding in her eyes. She was a mother too. He could see it in the way she held his daughter, in the practiced ease of her movements, in the tenderness of her expression. As the baby fed, the woman spoke softly in Chinese, perhaps to soothe the infant, perhaps to fill the silence. Jacob didn't understand the words, but he understood their meaning. When his daughter finally fell asleep, milk-drunk and peaceful, the woman carefully wrapped her back in the blankets and returned her to Jacob's arms. He held his child close, feeling her warmth, her steady breathing, the miracle of her survival. When he looked up, the woman was preparing tea. She poured 2 cups and sat across from him, her expression patient and kind. Through gestures and broken phrases, they began to communicate. Her name was Mei Lin. She pointed to herself, then to a cradle in the corner where a baby slept. Her own son, perhaps 3 or 4 months old. Her husband, she indicated with gestures, was gone. Dead. Jacob understood from the sorrow in her eyes. They were both widowed, both alone in this harsh wilderness, both struggling to survive. As night fell, Mei Lin made it clear he should stay. The storm outside had intensified, and traveling with a newborn would be suicide. She prepared a simple meal of rice and vegetables, and they ate in companionable silence. Every few hours, she would feed his daughter alongside her own son, and each time Jacob felt his heart swell with gratitude so profound it was almost painful. Over the following days, a routine emerged. The storm trapped them in the cabin, but Jacob made himself useful, chopping wood, checking Mei Lin's small livestock shelter, repairing things that needed fixing. Mei Lin continued to nurse both babies, her generosity saving his daughter's life with each feeding. They learned to communicate through gestures, drawings, and the few English words Mei Lin knew. She had come from San Francisco with her husband, seeking a new life, but he had died in a mining accident shortly after they'd settled here. Jacob found himself watching her as she moved about the cabin, marveling at her strength and resilience. She had endured her own tragedy, yet here she was, opening her home and her heart to a desperate stranger. She sang to the babies in Chinese, soft lullabies that seemed to soothe his daughter as much as her own son. On the fourth evening, as they sat by the fire with the babies sleeping peacefully between them, Jacob tried to find the words to express his gratitude. "You saved her life," he said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you." Mei Lin looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes. "Same," she said carefully in English, gesturing around the cabin. "You help. I help. Same." Jacob understood. They were helping each other survive. In this brutal, lonely wilderness, they had found something precious. Not just survival, but companionship, mutual support, the beginnings of trust. When the storm finally broke, Jacob knew he should return to his ranch. There were animals to tend, responsibilities to fulfill. But he also knew his daughter still needed milk, and Mei Lin was the only one who could provide it. They worked out an arrangement through patient communication. He would return to his ranch with supplies for Mei Lin, and then he would bring his daughter back for feedings. It wasn't ideal, but it would work until the baby could be weaned. Over the following weeks, Jacob found himself making the journey to Mei Lin's cabin more frequently than necessary. He told himself it was for his daughter, but he knew it was more than that. He found himself thinking about Mei Lin's quiet strength, her gentle laugh, the way she hummed while she worked. He noticed how his daughter reached for her, how peaceful she seemed in Mei Lin's arms. One day, as spring began to tentatively push through the last of winter's grip, Jacob arrived at the cabin with a proposal. His ranch was larger, with more resources and better protection from the elements. Mei Lin's cabin, while cozy, was isolated and vulnerable. Would she consider moving to his ranch? Not as a hired hand or a servant, but as a partner, someone who would share in the work and the rewards. The children could grow up together, as siblings. Mei Lin was quiet for a long time, considering. Jacob waited, his heart pounding, realizing how much her answer mattered to him. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said simply. "For babies. Is better." The move happened gradually. Jacob brought supplies, made repairs, prepared space in his ranch house. When Mei Lin finally arrived with her son, it felt like something had shifted into place, like a puzzle piece finding its home. The ranch, which had felt so empty and cold after Sarah's death, began to feel alive again. They worked side by side, combining their knowledge and skills. Mei Lin brought her understanding of herbs and traditional medicine, her efficient gardening techniques, her different perspective on problem solving. Jacob provided protection, his knowledge of ranching, his connections to the broader community. Together, they created something stronger than either could have built alone. The town folk talked, of course. A white rancher and a Chinese woman living together raised eyebrows and sparked gossip. But Jacob didn't care. He'd watched his daughter nearly die, had been saved by Mei Lin's compassion and generosity. Anyone who had a problem with that could stay off his land. As the months passed and the babies grew, something deeper developed between Jacob and Mei Lin. It started with shared glances, moments of understanding that needed no words. It grew through late evening conversations, through shared laughter at the children's antics, through the quiet comfort of companionship. They had both loved and lost, both knew the pain of being alone. Perhaps that's why, when love came again, They recognized it for the gift it was. One evening, as they watched their children play together on the floor, Jacob reached for Mei Lin's hand. She didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said, as he had said 100 times before. But this time, he meant something more than gratitude for saving his daughter's life. He meant thank you for staying, for building this life with him, for teaching him that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story. Mei Lin squeezed his hand, her smile soft and knowing. "Same," she replied, and in that single word was everything they both felt. Gratitude, affection, hope, and the beginning of something neither had expected to find again. Their story became legend in those parts. The widowed rancher and the Chinese woman who saved his daughter's life and, in doing so, saved his own. But to Jacob and Mei Lin, it was simply life. Hard, beautiful, unexpected, and worth every moment.